Snowflakes drifted through the air like lost feathers, their slow descent reflecting the pale glow of the street lamps. Officer Mark Hollis gripped the steering wheel tighter as his patrol SUV rolled through the slush-covered road. The world outside was quiet, too quiet for a night like this. Christmas was a week away, but the cheer felt hollow this year. His father, a decorated World War II veteran, lay in St. Jude's County Hospital, fighting pneumonia and the weight of old age. Beside him, his canine partner Rex sat upright, ember eyes flicking toward every passing light. The German Shepherd had been with Mark for 6 years, a steadfast partner who had once dragged him from a burning building. But tonight, Rex's ears were pinned back, his body rigid. He wasn't at ease. Mark noticed it too. Something about the night carried an unspoken warning. The hospital emerged through the snow haze, its windows glowing dimly against the white darkness. Mark parked, the wipers squeaking one last time before silence swallowed them. "Come on, boy," he murmured, pushing the door open. The cold bit into his face as he stepped out, and the crunch of snow under his boots echoed in the stillness. Rex leapt down, his breath steaming in the air. Together, they crossed the parking lot toward the automatic doors. Inside, the hospital felt even colder. The halls were nearly empty, the night nurse at the front desk barely glancing up. "Evening, Officer Hollis," she said quietly. "Your father's still in room 214. Mark nodded.
Thanks, Denise.
Rex's claws clicked softly on the linoleum floor. As they made their way up, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, throwing long shadows that danced across the walls. When they reached the corridor where his father's room waited, Rex slowed, his nose twitched. Then a low, throaty growl rolled from his chest. "Easy, buddy," Mark whispered, but Rex didn't ease. He was staring straight ahead, toward room 214. Mark frowned. The door was ajar, the light inside dim. He could see movement, someone standing by his father's bed. For a split second he felt relief, probably just the nurse. But then Rex lunged forward, barking sharply. The sudden explosion of sound shattered the silence. Mark rushed in behind him. Inside, a young nurse in scrubs stood frozen beside his father's IV line. A syringe halfway plunged into the port. The liquid inside glowed faintly green. His father, pale and frail, stirred weakly on the bed, his breathing uneven.
"Oh, what the hell are you doing?"
Mark barked, instinctively stepping between his father and the syringe. The nurse's eyes widened. I was giving him his medication. That's not morphine," Mark snapped. Years on the force had honed his instincts, and right now, every one of them screamed danger. Rex stood between them, growling, his teeth bared. The nurse hesitated, her hand trembling. "Please, I'm just following orders," she whispered. Whose orders?" Mark demanded. But she didn't answer. Instead, she dropped the syringe and bolted toward the door. Mark lunged after her, but Rex was faster. The shepherd moved like lightning, cutting her off at the doorway. She stumbled backward, trapped. "Stay right there," Mark said, pulling his radio from his belt. But before he could call for backup, the nurse raised her hands, tears welling up. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "They told me he was dying anyway, that it was just to ease the suffering." Mark froze. "Who told you that?" "The man in the gray coat. He said it was mercy. He said..." They all agreed. Her voice cracked. As Rex's growl deepened, Mark's gaze flicked to the syringe on the floor. The liquid shimmered strangely under the fluorescent light. Something about it didn't belong here. He knelt, carefully picking it up with a tissue. "You're coming with me," he said. But before he could take her down the hall, the lights flickered again, and the power cut out. The hallway plunged into darkness. Rex barked sharply. Muscles coiled. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. Then another. The generator buzzed to life, casting dim red emergency light across the walls. When Mark turned back, she was gone. Rex whined, circling the spot where she had stood. "Damn it," Mark muttered, scanning the hallway. His father's frail breathing filled the room behind him. He couldn't chase her, not yet. He knelt beside his father instead, checking his pulse, weak but steady. The IV had stopped dripping. He unplugged the line and pulled the chair closer, sitting heavily, as Rex rested his head on his lap. For a long while, the only sound was the faint hum of the backup power. Mark's thoughts raced. The syringe wasn't from this hospital, he knew that much. Its label was missing, replaced by a plain white sticker. His father had served 2 tours in Vietnam, survived malaria, shrapnel wounds, and a lifetime of nightmares. He didn't deserve to die like this, slipped away by someone pretending to care. He looked down at Rex. "You saved him, boy," he whispered. Rex only stared at the door. He is twitching. Morning came slowly, the storm outside still swirling. When Dr. Langford arrived, Mark confronted him with the syringe. The older man's face turned ashen. "This isn't hospital issue," he said quietly. "Where did you find this?" "In my father's IV line," Mark said. Langford's expression hardened. "Officer Hollis, you need to come with me." He led Mark down a quiet corridor, into a restricted area of the hospital, a small, sterile lab filled with computers and storage fridges. Inside, a middle-aged man in a grey coat was packing files into a box. Mark froze. Grey coat. The nurse's words echoed in his mind. "Dr. Avery," Langford said sharply. "What's going on here?" Avery looked up, startled. His eyes darted to the syringe in Mark's hand and widened. "Where did you get that?" Mark's jaw clenched. "You tell me." Avery's hands trembled slightly. "It was the clinical trial," he said finally. "Experimental antiviral compounds for elderly patients. The company discontinued it, but we..." "You were testing unapproved drugs on veterans?" Mark snapped. "Without consent?" Avery said nothing. The silence was his answer. Mark stepped forward, his fury barely contained. "You almost killed my father." But before Avery could reply, Rex growled again, a deep guttural warning. Mark turned. At the far end of the hall, 2 men in dark coats were approaching. They didn't look like hospital staff. Langford whispered, "Mark, we need to get out of here." They retreated quickly through the stairwell, Rex leading the way. The heavy boots behind them echoed closer, faster. Mark's pulse pounded in his ears as they burst through the exit into the snow. The icy air burned his lungs. They made it to his SUV, and as he started the engine, Rex barked loudly at the shadows near the hospital door. The men stopped short. When they saw the flashing red and blue lights, Mark floored the accelerator. Later, in the precinct, evidence came together piece by piece. The nurse confessed under questioning. The compassion doses were part of an underground network, an illegal euthanasia scheme targeting elderly patients, whose care costs were deemed unsustainable. The liquid compound was designed to simulate organ failure, but none of it would have come to light, if not for one dog's instinct. When the snow finally stopped falling 3 days later, Mark returned to the hospital. His father was awake, weak but lucid. "You caught them, didn't you?" the old man asked. Mark smiled faintly. "Yeah, Dad." Rex caught them. The old veteran chuckled weakly. "That dog always knew when something wasn't right. You should listen to him more often." Mark sat beside the bed, watching his father's frail hand rest on Rex's head. Outside, snowflakes drifted again, silent and pure. For the first time in weeks, peace settled over the room. "I thought I'd lose you," Mark whispered. The old man squeezed his hand. "Son, I've seen worse than death. What matters is what we stand for while we live." Mark nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "We'll make sure no one else suffers like that." Rex looked up, eyes calm now, tail thumping once against the floor, as if agreeing. Days later, the story broke nationwide. Investigations led to arrests, resignations, and a full federal inquiry. But the one image that stayed in every headline wasn't of the officers or the doctors. It was of a German shepherd sitting beside a hospital bed, head bowed, guarding the man he'd saved. In the weeks that followed, Mark often found himself standing outside in the snow, watching Rex play in the yard. Sometimes he thought about everything that had happened, about the nurse's tears, the fear in her eyes, the fragile line between mercy and murder. He realized something profound. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet growl that warns you before darkness strikes. And as the first dawn of the new year painted the horizon pink over the snow, Mark knelt beside Rex, scratching his ear. "You're more than a partner, boy," he whispered. "You're a guardian." Rex leaned his head against his shoulder, eyes closing. The world was still cold, still imperfect. But for that moment, it felt like grace had returned to the earth. The days following the arrests were a blur of statements, reports, and endless interviews. Mark barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that faint green glow of the syringe and heard Rex's growl echoing in the sterile hospital room. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was disbelief. How many others had been hurt before he happened to walk in that night? The morning news called it the Mercy Network. Politicians used words like oversight and systemic failure. But to Mark, it was simple. They had tried to play God with people who had already given everything. Veterans, widows, the forgotten ones. His father had once said, "A soldier never fears dying for his country. He fears being forgotten by it." Now those words haunted him. Snow still blanketed the small New England town. The hospital, standing like a gray fortress against the white hills. Inside, the air felt lighter, as though the walls themselves had exhaled relief after weeks of secrets. His father, Walter Hollis, sat up in bed, color returning to his cheeks. The window beside him framed a world washed clean by snow. "Any news?" the old man asked, as Mark stepped in, Rex padding quietly beside him. "Plenty," Mark replied, pulling off his gloves. Turns out it wasn't just here. They've got similar reports in Ohio, Vermont, and Maine, all connected to the same private contractor. Walter sighed. "We used to call it friendly fire when our own turned on us. Never thought I'd see it happen in a hospital." Rex let out a low, thoughtful rumble, tail sweeping gently across the floor. Mark smiled faintly. "He agrees with you." Walter reached out, his weathered hand scratching behind the shepherd's ear. "You've got a good soul, Rex. You didn't just save my life. You saved my faith." That struck something deep in Mark. His father had always been a man of unshakable belief, the kind who prayed before every meal, even when rations were scarce overseas. But illness had chipped away at that strength. Seeing him pray again was like watching a candle relight after being snuffed out. That night, snow began falling again, thick, heavy flakes swirling like ghosts. Mark drove home through the storm, with Rex curled in the passenger seat, his head resting on the console. The radio played faint Christmas music, but the world felt eerily still. As he turned onto his driveway, Rex suddenly lifted his head, ears pricking, his gaze fixed on the tree line beside the house. Mark slowed the car, peering through the windshield. A shadow moved just beyond the edge of the porch light. "Stay," he whispered. Stepping out quietly, the snow crunched beneath his boots, and his breath fogged the air. Then he saw it. A man's figure retreating into the woods. "Hey!" Mark shouted, hand on his holster. The figure turned, and for a moment the porch light caught his face. Dr. Avery. Mark started forward, but Avery was already gone, swallowed by the swirling snow. He returned to the car, heart pounding. Rex was whining softly, restless. The next morning, Mark went straight to the precinct. "Avery's on the run," he told his captain. "He was at my house last night." They launched a statewide alert, but Avery vanished like a ghost. Days turned into weeks. The holidays came and went, muted by the weight of unfinished justice. Yet through it all, Rex never let his guard down. He would sit by the window every evening, watching the snow-covered street, as though waiting for something. Then one bitter January night, Mark got the call. A hiker had found a body in the frozen woods behind St. Jude's Hospital. When Mark arrived, the area was already cordoned off. The scene was quiet, except for the whisper of wind through the bare trees. The man lying in the snow wore a grey coat, half buried beneath the drift. In his stiff hand was a folded piece of paper. Mark crouched beside the coroner, his breath visible in the cold air. "Is it him?" "Yes," the coroner said. "Dr. Avery." Mark carefully unfolded the note. The ink was smudged by melted snow, but the words were still legible. It was never supposed to hurt anyone. They promised it was painless, merciful. "Forgive me." Mark stood in silence, the paper trembling slightly in his gloved hand. Rex pressed against his leg, eyes searching his face, as if sensing the heaviness there. There was no satisfaction in finding Avery, only sorrow. A week later, the papers ran their final headline. "Whistleblower found dead in woods." Investigation concludes Mercy Network scandal. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Not really. Some wounds ran deeper than headlines. At the hospital, his father was improving. He could walk again with a cane, his voice steadier each day. On one of those mornings, as they watched the snow fall from his window, he said quietly, "You know, son, war isn't always fought with guns. Sometimes it's fought with conscience." Mark nodded. "And sometimes it's a dog that keeps you from losing it." They both looked down at Rex, lying stretched across the floor, his head resting on his paws. The dog opened one eye, tail flicking lazily, as if understanding every word. In the spring, when the snow finally melted, a small ceremony was held at the police station. The mayor presented Rex with a medal for exceptional service and instinct in the preservation of life. Cameras flashed, but Rex didn't seem to care. He just sat calmly beside Mark, eyes fixed on the man who had become his whole world. Later that night, when the crowd was gone and the streets were quiet again, Mark sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the moonlight glint off the last patches of snow. His father sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket. Rex lay between them, chin resting on Mark's boot. "Do you ever wonder why he growled that night?" Walter asked softly. Mark smiled faintly. "I used to think it was just instinct. Now I'm not so sure." The old man nodded. "Maybe it was something higher. Maybe that dog was sent to keep you from breaking." Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. Somewhere deep down, he believed it too. The world outside was quiet. The night sky clear for the first time in months. Snow shimmered under the moonlight, and the wind whispered through the trees like a prayer. Rex shifted, pressing his head against Mark's knee. The warmth of the moment, fragile and fleeting, filled the silence between them. And for the first time since that terrible night, Mark felt peace. Not the loud kind that comes from victory, but the kind that feels like grace, quiet and steady, beneath the endless white sky. He looked down at Rex, smiling through tired eyes. "You really are the voice of God's warning, aren't you, boy?" Rex thumped his tail once, the sound soft as snow. The wind carried the church bells from town, distant but clear, and somewhere in that sound, in that frozen night, there was hope again.